They laughed when I was homeless. Now they want the house I bought without their help. When I lost everything in the pandemic, my family finally called me back. Not to help, to charge me rent for parking my homeless shelter on wheels in their driveway. That's when I knew the war had begun. Everyone has a place in their family. Mine was always on the outside looking in. My name is Caleb Mercer, 32 years old and still carrying the invisible scars of a childhood where I was the forgotten son. I've built a life for myself, a quiet apartment, a stable job that pays the bills, and enough solitude to keep the old wounds from reopening too often. No wife, no kids, just me and the career I've poured myself into because it was the only thing that never picked favorites. They say hard work pays off, but fate seems to have missed that memo in my case. Every time I climb a rung on the ladder, something breaks beneath me. Yet I keep climbing, fueled by a secret that would turn my family's world upside down if they knew. Sometimes I touch the flash drive in my pocket just to remind myself it's real. My parents, Walter and Diana Mercer, mastered the art of selective love. Their affection has always been a limited resource, reserved almost exclusively for my younger brother Logan. I became visible in their eyes only when they needed something, money, help with the house, or someone to blame when things went wrong. Caleb, why can't you be more like your brother? The question that shaped my childhood. What they never asked was why Logan couldn't be more like me. Responsible, independent, self-sufficient. At 29, Logan still lives with our parents, along with his wife Sabrina and their 4 children. He has a decent job but no ambition beyond his next paycheck. Why would he? The bank of mom and dad has always been open for business, for him at least. If Caleb has something, I deserve it more. Logan's life philosophy drilled into him by parents who treated him like the sun their world revolved around. Then there's Sabrina. Beautiful, manipulative Sabrina. College-educated but professionally unemployed, she's perfected the art of crying on command and playing victim when the situation calls for it. She takes special pleasure in cutting me down at family gatherings, her sugar-coated venom always drawing sympathetic looks from my parents. What no one knows, not even Logan, is that Sabrina carries a secret that would shatter their perfect family portrait. I discovered it by accident, and sometimes I wonder if that knowledge makes me as toxic as them. Their house is a monument to dysfunction. 3 bedrooms crammed with 6 adults and 4 children. Privacy is a luxury, space a constant battle. Yet Logan has never considered moving out, and my parents have never suggested it. We need more room, Logan and Sabrina constantly complain, while my parents nod in solemn agreement. No one ever asks about my life, my space, my needs. I sometimes wonder if there's something else at play. Some hidden reason my parents keep their golden child so close. What are they planning that I'm not privy to? Whatever it is, I know one thing for certain. In the Mercer family, fairness has always been a foreign concept. I was 3 years old when Logan was born. I still remember that day, not because of the joy, but because it was the exact moment I became invisible in my own home. Like a light switch being flipped, my parents' attention turned away from me, never to fully return. From that point on, Logan had everything. New toys arrived weekly for him while mine gathered dust. His closet overflowed with clothes sporting price tags that made my hand-me-downs look like charity donations. If I received something nice, a rare occurrence, Logan would inevitably get the upgraded version within days. We need to be fair, my mother would say, though her definition of fairness was painfully one-sided. By kindergarten, I'd learned that equality was just a word adults used when convenient. My birthday parties were modest affairs, if celebrated at all. A small cake from the grocery store, maybe one present wrapped in yesterday's newspaper. Logan's birthdays, however, were productions worthy of royalty, custom cakes, mountains of gifts, and parties that our parents talked about for months. Caleb doesn't care about parties anyway, they'd tell relatives who noticed the disparity. He's more practical. I wasn't practical. I was a child who'd learned not to want things. Christmas mornings told the same story. When extended family visited, my pile of presents matched Logan's. My parents couldn't risk their reputation. But during the years we celebrated alone, I'd unwrap socks and school supplies while Logan tore through the latest video games and designer clothes. Once, at 9 years old, I dared to ask why Santa was so much more generous to Logan. "Don't be selfish," my father snapped. Your brother deserves nice things. He appreciates them more than you do. That became the pattern. Any complaint from me was selfishness. Any demand from Logan was justified. If we fought, I was punished for antagonizing him, regardless of who started it. When my Aunt Jane finally confronted my parents about their favoritism, we moved across town the following month. Problem solved. Logan quickly realized he operated under a different set of rules. He became my personal tormentor, knowing there would never be consequences. He broke my toys, ruined my homework, and whispered threats only I could hear. By 13, I'd grown taller than him, but fighting back meant facing my parents' wrath, so I learned to endure. The cruelest blow came during my sophomore year of high school when I started dating Emma Mitchell. She was kind, smart, and somehow saw something in me worth loving. For 6 blissful months, I experienced what it felt like to matter to someone. Then Logan, 14 and already practiced in manipulation, set his sights on her. He texted her constantly, told elaborate lies about me, and worked to convince her she'd chosen the wrong brother. When I confronted him, he played innocent. "It's not my fault she likes me better," he smirked. I pleaded with my parents to intervene, but they dismissed it as boys being boys. When Emma broke up with me to date Logan 2 weeks later, they actually congratulated him. That night, staring at my ceiling, something hardened inside me. The realization was simple but profound. My family would never protect me. They would never choose me. At 17, with $50 and a backpack of clothes, I left without saying goodbye. I crashed on friends' couches, picked up odd jobs, and started building a life on my own terms. When my mother called 3 weeks later, it wasn't to beg me to come home. It was to ask if I'd be returning the cell phone they'd paid for. They were relieved to be rid of me. One less mouth to feed. One less reminder that they were capable of loving one child while neglecting another. What they didn't know then, what they couldn't possibly understand, was that I would return. Not as the broken boy who left, but as someone with the power to upend their carefully constructed reality. The day would come when they'd remember I existed, and by then it would be too late. I'd spent nearly a decade building my life from nothing. A decent apartment, a steady job at an insurance firm, and enough savings to feel secure. Not wealthy by any means, but stable, until 2020 shattered everything. The pandemic hit like a tsunami. Our company downsized, and my position was eliminated in the first wave of layoffs. Last hired, first fired, my manager explained with practiced sympathy. I had 3 months of savings, enough time to find something new under normal circumstances. But these weren't normal circumstances. Jobs vanished. My roommate, who'd also been laid off, moved back with his parents in Ohio. My lease ended with no possibility of renewal without proof of income. Each day, my bank balance dwindled while my anxiety soared. The realization came during a sleepless night. I had nowhere to go, no safety net, no family willing to catch me. Friends were struggling with their own pandemic nightmares. After weeks of fruitless job hunting and housing searches, I made a desperate decision. I sold everything I couldn't carry and bought a 1993 Dodge Camper for $1,000 from a guy behind a gas station. It was falling apart, but it was shelter. I told myself it was temporary. With hope I didn't feel, I called my parents. Maybe they'd let me park in their driveway for a few weeks until I found work. It was a humbling request, but desperate times and all that. "That's not possible, Caleb," my mother said without hesitation. "The house is already bursting at the seams with Logan's family." "It's just in the driveway," I argued. "I wouldn't be inside the house." My father took the phone. "We don't think that would work. We've never really gotten along, have we?" But his tone shifted, and I recognized the familiar sound of an approaching transaction. "If you want to pay rent, maybe we could arrange something." The amount he named was the same as my old apartment. "You want me to pay market rate to park in your driveway?" I asked, disbelief making my voice crack. "Property values in this neighborhood are high," he replied. "We can't have some rundown vehicle lowering our curb appeal for free." I heard Logan's voice in the background, followed by Sabrina's distinctive laugh. Then Logan was on the phone. "Holy shit, is my brother homeless now?" He didn't try to hide his amusement. "Man, how the mighty have fallen." Sabrina chimed in. "Who would have thought Mr. Independent would end up living in a van down by the river?" Their laughter felt like acid on an open wound. "I'm not homeless," I said, the lie bitter on my tongue. I'm just between places. Sure you are, Logan snickered. Hey, if you start begging on street corners, don't use our last name, okay? It would be embarrassing. I hung up and sat in my camper, hands shaking with rage and shame. The last tie to my family had just been severed, and, strangely, it felt like freedom. That first night in a Walmart parking lot was terrifying. Every sound jolted me awake. Car doors slamming, people arguing, police sirens wailing in the distance. I clutched a baseball bat to my chest until dawn broke. Reality quickly taught me harsh lessons. Most places don't want campers lingering. Security guards, police officers, even ordinary citizens would tap on my window telling me to move along. No overnight parking became the soundtrack of my existence. I learned to be invisible, to steal electricity from outdoor outlets at libraries and parks, to shower at truck stops when I could afford the fee, or clean myself with baby wipes when I couldn't. I ate cold canned food and peanut butter sandwiches, used public bathrooms and laundromats, carried my important documents in a waterproof bag. After nearly 6 months of this nomadic existence, I landed a data entry position in a neighboring city. The pay was modest, but it was steady. On my first night shift, I met Jamal Carter, the night security guard who patrolled the company parking lot. "That your camper?" he asked, flashlight illuminating my home on wheels. I braced for the usual eviction notice, but instead, Jamal surprised me. "My cousin lived in his car for a year after his divorce," he said. "Tough times don't make you less human." That conversation changed everything. Jamal allowed me to park in the far corner of the company lot. I had access to a bathroom, electricity from an outdoor maintenance outlet, and most importantly, safety. "Just keep it clean and don't make noise," was his only condition. "And when you get back on your feet, help someone else out." I started saving again, little by little, week by week. Not just money, but determination. The humiliation I'd faced from my own family had planted a seed inside me, one that would eventually grow into something they never expected. Life can change direction with surprising speed. 6 months after starting my data entry job, I was promoted to team supervisor. My performance evaluations were stellar, largely because while my colleagues went home to families and social lives, I poured everything into work. When you live in a camper, overtime isn't an inconvenience. It's an opportunity. By spring 2021, I had saved enough for a down payment on a modest house. Nothing fancy. A 1970s ranch-style home with 3 bedrooms and a spacious backyard. But it was mine. The moment the realtor handed me the keys, I stood in the empty living room and wept. No more parking lots. No more wondering where I'd sleep. No more public bathrooms. I parked my camper in the backyard, unable to part with it despite its peeling paint and questionable plumbing. It had sheltered me during my darkest days, and keeping it felt like an insurance policy against future disasters. A reminder of how quickly everything could disappear. In my excitement, I made a critical error. I posted photos of my new place on social media with the caption, "From camper to homeowner, never give up." It wasn't meant as a boast, more a message of hope for anyone struggling. I hadn't used social media in months. I'd forgotten my family members were still connected to my accounts. 3 weeks later, a Sunday afternoon, I was assembling a bookshelf when the doorbell rang. Opening the door revealed a nightmare. Walter, Diana, Logan, Sabrina, and their 4 children standing on my porch like a family portrait gone wrong. "Surprise!" Diana exclaimed with practiced cheerfulness. "We thought we'd come see your new place." Before I could respond, they pushed past me into my home, spreading through the rooms like an invading army. Diana ran her finger along my kitchen counter, checking for dust. Walter inspected the ceiling corners for water damage. The children scattered, touching everything. "Nice place," Logan said, hands in his pockets as he surveyed my living room. "Bigger than it looked in the pictures." Sabrina's smile never reached her eyes. "It's lovely, but what are you going to do with all this space? It's just you here, right? No wife, no kids?" "I use every room," I replied, though I didn't owe her an explanation. Walter cleared his throat. 3 bedrooms for one person seems excessive, don't you think?" "I have an office and a guest room," I said, watching them exchange glances. Diana sat on my couch without invitation. "You know, we've been thinking about your situation." "My situation is fine," I cut in. Better than fine. Logan gestured toward the hallway. Can we talk privately for a minute, bro? Reluctantly, I followed him to my kitchen, aware of Sabrina distracting her children with tablets while she strained to eavesdrop. Here's the thing, Logan began, his voice conspiratorial. We're suffocating at Mom and Dad's. 4 kids in 1 bedroom. Sabrina and I on a pull-out couch. It's not working. I waited, knowing there was more. So we were thinking, you've got all this space, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and it's just you. He spread his hands like he was presenting a logical conclusion. We could move in here. You could keep your camper in the back. You're used to it anyway, right? The audacity stunned me. You want me to give you my house and live in my camper? Not give, he corrected quickly. Share. Family helping family. Share, I repeated. And what would you contribute to this arrangement? Logan looked confused. We'd be managing the place, taking care of it. And rent? I asked. His expression darkened. Come on, man. We're family. You know our situation. That's when I understood. This wasn't a request. It was an attempted acquisition. They'd seen what I'd built and wanted to claim it, just like they'd always claimed everything that was mine. No, I said, the word surprisingly easy to pronounce. What? No, I repeated louder. This is my house. I bought it. I pay the mortgage and I don't owe any of you a damn thing. His face flushed. After everything Mom and Dad did for you. Did for me? I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. They kicked me to the curb when I needed them most. They wanted to charge me rent to sleep in a camper in their driveway. So no, Logan, you're not moving in here. Not today. Not ever. From the living room, I heard Diana ask, which bedroom would be best for the twins? I stepped back into the room, my decision crystallizing. None of them. You need to leave, now. Diana's shocked expression might have been comical under different circumstances. We only just got here. And now you're leaving. Sabrina clutched at her chest like I'd physically struck her. You'd throw out your own family? With children? My family? I looked at each of them in turn. Where was my family when I was living in a Walmart parking lot? Where was my family when I was showering at truck stops? Where was my family when I needed a place to park my camper for a few weeks? Walter stepped forward, hands raised placatingly. Now, Caleb, let's be reasonable. Reasonable ended when you showed up uninvited thinking you could take my home. I moved to the door, holding it open. Get out. As they filed past me, faces contorted with indignation, I realized that this wasn't the end. It was the opening salvo in a war I hadn't asked for but would have to fight regardless. Logan paused at the threshold, his voice low enough that only I could hear. You'll regret this. You have no idea what's coming. I met his gaze steadily. Neither do you. The atmosphere in my living room grew even more tense after my refusal. Sabrina's face transformed instantly, her features contorting into a mask of distress as she clutched her stomach. You can't do this to a pregnant mother, she wailed, tears appearing on command. I hadn't even noticed her pregnancy until she drew attention to it. Where are we supposed to go? The children need stability. That's not my problem, I replied, unmoved by the performance I'd seen countless times before. If you need housing, find it yourselves, just like I had to. Walter stepped toward me, finger raised like I was still a child he could intimidate. You cannot be this selfish. Logan is your brother. We're family, Diana chimed in, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. You can't turn your back on your own blood. A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Blood? You've never treated me like family. Don't expect me to sacrifice for Logan just because you've always wanted me to. They left that day with angry words and slammed doors, but I knew it wasn't over. My family had never accepted defeat gracefully, especially when they wanted something. A week later, I was working from home when the unmistakable rumble of a moving truck broke my concentration. Looking out my front window, I froze at the sight. A rental truck parked in my driveway, its back open as Logan directed movers carrying furniture toward my house. Walter and Diana stood nearby, supervising as if this were a perfectly normal family move-in day. I burst through my front door in time to see Sabrina striding up my walkway, a smug smile plastered across her face. Your mom said we'd be living here, she announced, her voice dripping with triumph. Looks like your little tantrum didn't work. I clenched my fists, my entire body rigid with fury. This was no longer about hurt feelings or old grudges. This was a home invasion disguised as family entitlement. Moving toward my front door to block it, I discovered something that turned my blood cold. My lock had been drilled out and replaced. The new key in Logan's hand confirmed my suspicion. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I demanded. Logan pulled a sheaf of papers from his back pocket, waving them in my face. "We have a rental agreement. Mom signed it for you. This house is family property now." I snatched the papers from his hand. The crude forgery of my signature was almost laughable. It didn't even remotely match my handwriting. Without a word, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, maintaining eye contact with Logan as I did. "What are you doing?" Walter demanded. "Calling the police to report a breaking and entering," I replied calmly. "And attempted fraud." Sabrina lunged forward, slamming her hands against my car door. "Stop! Don't call the police!" I looked at her with cold determination. Let's see what the police have to say about this little scheme. The police arrived within minutes, 2 officers who listened carefully as I explained the situation. I showed them my deed, my ID, and the forged rental agreement. "They drilled out my locks and tried to move in without my permission," I explained. "And they forged my signature on this fake rental agreement." The older officer turned to Logan. "Sir, can you show me proof that Mr. Mercer consented to this arrangement?" Logan stammered, looking to our parents for help. "We're family. We don't need written permission." "Actually, you do," the officer replied. "Without the homeowner's consent, this constitutes breaking and entering, which is a felony." Sabrina tried her tears again, rubbing her pregnant belly for emphasis. "We just need a place for our children. We're desperate." The female officer wasn't impressed. "Ma'am, you were just witnessed assaulting the homeowner and attempting to damage his property. Would you like to add assault charges to the situation?" Sabrina's face drained of color, and she stepped back without another word. I turned to my parents, who stood rigid with shock that their plan was collapsing. "I can press charges against all of you," I said quietly. "Breaking and entering, forgery, attempted fraud? Is that what you want?" Walter's face flushed crimson, but he remained silent with the police present. Diana wasn't as restrained. "Please," she begged, "just do this one thing for Logan." I smiled then, a smile that contained 32 years of accumulated pain and resentment. "No." The older officer stepped between us. "Everyone who doesn't live here needs to remove their belongings from the truck and leave immediately. If you return without permission, you will be arrested for trespassing." I watched from my porch as they loaded their furniture back into the truck. Logan wouldn't look at me. Sabrina glared with naked hatred. My parents seemed smaller somehow, diminished by their failed scheme. As they drove away, I knew this battle was over, but the war likely wasn't. I called a locksmith immediately to replace the damaged locks, then contacted a security company to install cameras around my property. If they came back, I'd have evidence. That night, sitting in my quiet, empty house, my house, I felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Not happiness, exactly. Not peace. But something adjacent to both. The satisfaction of finally standing my ground and winning. For the first time in my life, I'd faced down the Mercer family and emerged victorious. The aftermath of the failed home invasion spread through our extended family like wildfire. Aunt Jane called to check on me, revealing that she'd heard everything from my cousin Mark. "Everyone's talking about it," she said. "Logan and Sabrina have become pariahs. No one wants them at family gatherings anymore." Walter and Diana weren't faring much better. Their carefully crafted image as doting parents had shattered, replaced by the truth. They were manipulative enablers who'd raised a son to believe he was entitled to take whatever he wanted. Sabrina's social media went silent. No more carefully staged family photos. No more inspirational quotes about motherhood. No more thinly veiled jabs at me. The humiliation of having the police called on them had finally accomplished what years of my absence couldn't. It made them reflect on their actions. That December, I hosted Christmas in my home for the first time. I invited friends from work, Jamal and his family, and relatives who had reached out after the incident. The house filled with genuine laughter and warmth. No underlying tension, no walking on eggshells. "You fought enough, Caleb," my great-uncle Robert said, clapping my shoulder as we stood in the kitchen. Time to enjoy the victory. Looking around at these people who respected my boundaries and valued my company, I realized he was right. The weight I'd carried since childhood, the desperate need for validation from people who would never give it, had finally lifted. 3 days after New Year's, a text message from Diana appeared on my phone. "Sweetheart, Logan and Sabrina are still struggling. The baby is due any day now. Could you reconsider? Family should stick together." I stared at the message, feeling nothing but a strange, calm clarity. They hadn't learned a thing. To them, family remained a one-way street, my obligation to give, their right to take. I typed a simple response. "I don't have any family named Mercer." Then, I blocked her number, along with Walter's, Logan's, and Sabrina's. The last tie severed, clean and final. Spring brought new beginnings. I started dating a woman I met at a neighborhood cookout, someone with no connection to my past, who knew me only as I am now. I booked my first real vacation to the Pacific Northwest. I planted a garden in my backyard right next to the camper I kept as a monument to survival. Sometimes I sit in that camper with a beer, remembering the desperate man who once called it home. The crushing loneliness, the uncertainty, the humiliation. But those memories no longer have power over me. For 32 years, I believed I was the forgotten son, the one who didn't matter. I was wrong. It wasn't that they forgot me. They simply never saw me at all. Not as a child deserving of love, not as a man deserving of respect. Now I see myself clearly. I am Caleb Mercer, survivor, homeowner, master of my own fate, and for the first time in my life, that's enough.